You've read the story. Maybe it was a book, maybe a podcast, maybe someone in a YouTube comment section explaining how they turned $5,000 into financial freedom by following a specific set of steps. And you felt it, that spark of, this is it. You took notes. You tried the steps. And somewhere between step 3 and step 7, something stopped adding up. The results didn't match the story. Maybe you got close and then something shifted. Maybe it never took off at all. Either way, you ended up back at the beginning, wondering what you missed. Most people, when that happens, assume the problem is them. It's not. Or at least, it's not only them. Here's what's actually happening, and it changes how all of this looks. The stories that reach you, the books, the interviews, the comment section testimonials, are not a random sample of everyone who tried. They're the ones that worked. The people who followed the same advice and ended up worse off aren't writing memoirs. They're not doing podcast interviews. They're not in the YouTube comments section explaining how it went for them. They're just quiet. And because they're quiet, you don't know they exist. So you're looking at a filtered version of reality and treating it like a complete picture. This has a name: survivorship bias. But knowing the name doesn't fix the problem, because the bias runs deeper than most people realize. Here's a way to feel the actual scale of it. Imagine 1,000 people read the same book about investing and decide to apply it seriously. Some start with strong income and room to weather a downturn. Some start with thin margins and almost no flexibility. Some enter the market in a decade of steady growth. Some enter right before a multi-year correction. The book doesn't know which of those situations you're in. It was written by someone who succeeded. Someone who, in most cases, also had specific conditions working in their favor that the book never mentions, because those conditions felt unremarkable to them at the time. And the full distribution of everyone else, all the people who tried the same approach with different starting points, doesn't appear anywhere in the text. You're holding one data point and treating it like a pattern. Now here's the part that doesn't get said often enough, and this is where it gets genuinely interesting. The problem isn't just that you're hearing from the winners. It's that the winners themselves usually can't tell you why they won. Not accurately. When someone builds wealth through real estate, they tend to attribute it to their research, their patience, their ability to spot a good deal. And maybe those things were real. But if they bought in 2011, in the depths of a market that was about to spend a decade recovering, the timing was doing enormous work that the story never mentions. The patience is real, the research is real, and the market cycle they happen to enter at the bottom is also real, and it never makes it into the lesson. What you get in the success story is the strategy. What you never get is the conditions. And when you try the strategy in different conditions, you're running a different experiment while thinking you're replicating the original one. Think about it this way. Imagine 100 people follow the exact same investing approach. Same steps, same discipline, same commitment. Some started in 2009, buying into a market about to go on one of the longest runs in history. Some started in 2022, at the beginning of a sharp correction. Same strategy, completely different outcomes. The ones who started in 2009 have a success story. The ones who started in 2022 have a lesson. But nobody's asking them to write a book about it. The strategy didn't change. The world around the strategy did. And here's what makes this genuinely uncomfortable. It means the quality of your decisions and the quality of your outcomes can come apart completely. You can make every right move and still land in the unlucky distribution. And you can make several questionable moves and land in the lucky one. The success story doesn't tell you which situation you're in, because the person writing it usually can't tell either. So here's the question that actually matters. If you can't trust the success story to give you the full picture, what are you supposed to do with it? Most people, when they sit with this, feel two things at once. The first is a kind of relief. The strategies that didn't work out weren't entirely their fault. The second is something harder to name. Because if timing and starting conditions matter this much, it means effort and smart choices matter less than you want them to. And most people have spent years, maybe decades, operating on the belief that the right moves executed with enough discipline will produce the right results. That belief isn't just a financial strategy. It's part of how people understand themselves, their work ethic, their ability to figure things out. The idea that a gap in outcomes reflects a gap in effort, and that closing one closes the other. Letting go of that, even partially, feels like something you're not supposed to say out loud. It sounds like an excuse. It sounds like deciding in advance that you won't succeed. And there's something else underneath it too. Most people who have been consuming success stories for any length of time have also been quietly measuring themselves against those stories. Treating them as evidence of what's possible, yes, but also as a baseline for what a person with the right approach should be able to achieve. When the results don't match, that comparison becomes a verdict. Conditions don't usually occur to you as the explanation, because conditions weren't part of how the story was framed. So you absorb the gap as information about yourself, rather than information about the mismatch between the story's context and your own. But here's the reframe. Acknowledging that conditions matter isn't the same as saying effort doesn't. It's saying that effort is necessary but not sufficient, and that the same effort in different conditions produces different results. A skilled sailor in a storm and a skilled sailor on calm water are both skilled. The weather isn't irrelevant. Pretending it is doesn't give you more control. It just makes you more likely to misdiagnose why something didn't work, and more likely to repeat the misdiagnosis next time. Better diagnosis is the whole game. The goal isn't to stop learning from success stories. It's to learn from them more carefully. And that's a skill, not a mindset shift. It looks like 3 specific habits. The first is to make one question automatic every time you encounter a success story. What did this person have going in that I might not? Not as a way to dismiss the story, as a way to calibrate it. Starting capital, the year they entered the market, job stability that let them hold through volatility without panicking, a partner's income as a backup, parents who could step in if something went sideways. None of these details usually appear in the story, but every one of them changes the experiment. Getting in the habit of asking this question doesn't make you cynical. It makes you a more accurate reader of evidence, and more accurate reading leads to better decisions. The second is to actively look for the failure cases of the same strategy. They're harder to find because they don't get amplified. Nobody publishes the book called "I Followed the Exact Same Steps and Lost 4 Years of Progress." But they exist. Financial forums, Reddit threads, comment sections where people are honest about what didn't pan out. These aren't cautionary tales to scare you off. They're the other half of the data. Reading only the wins and drawing conclusions from them is like flipping a coin 10 times, seeing 7 heads, and deciding the coin is rigged, without ever counting the tails. The failures are out there. Finding them is what completes the picture. The third is to run an honest audit of your own starting conditions before testing any strategy, and to revisit that audit regularly, not just once. Starting conditions aren't fixed. Your income changes, your savings buffer changes, the market environment changes. A strategy that didn't fit your situation 2 years ago might fit now. A strategy that worked before might carry more risk in your current circumstances than it did then. Knowing your conditions isn't a one-time check. It's an ongoing lens. And applying it means you stop borrowing strategies wholesale and start asking what actually applies to where you are right now. The success stories you've been reading aren't wrong. They're just incomplete. And the incompleteness isn't accidental. It's structural. The parts that got left out are the parts the author never thought to include, because from where they were standing, those parts were invisible. The missing chapter in every one of them is the conditions that made it possible. The year it happened, the safety net underneath it, the timing they didn't choose but benefited from. That chapter never gets written because the person who lived it doesn't think of those things as part of the story. To them, it's just context, background, life. But to you, reading without that chapter, the story becomes a formula. And formulas applied in the wrong conditions don't fail because you did something wrong. They fail because the formula was never complete to begin with. You weren't just following bad advice, and you weren't missing some obvious thing the successful people had figured out. You were following advice written for someone else's conditions, handed to you without the footnotes. I want to hear from you in the comments. What's a piece of financial advice you followed closely and it still didn't go the way the story said it would? Because I think the pattern is more predictable than most people realize. And it almost certainly has more to do with conditions than strategy. And if this one landed differently, subscribe. Because this is exactly the kind of thing we keep unpacking here.